In a world on the brink, with missiles streaking across European skies and diplomatic credibility in retreat, there's a curious return, not just of military salvos between Kyiv and Moscow, but of a more theatrical figure, Donald Trump, dusting off his Rolodex of strongmen. And this week, as Ukrainian drones reportedly target military installations in Moscow last night, and Russian missiles yet again pound Kyiv's defense infrastructure and attack civilians, Trump picked up the phone, not to Brussels, not to the UN, but to Ankara and President Erdogan. So the former relationship is now rekindled between President Trump and President Erdogan. They've shared what both described as a fruitful and productive call. Trump has been invited to Turkey. Erdogan will soon travel to Washington. But what lies behind the handshakes and the hashtags? This is not a new bromance. Their relationship was forged during a volatile era: Kurdish withdrawals, the Syrian-Turkey border debacle, and the sudden release of the American pastor Andy Brunson. Trump saw Erdogan as a man that he could do business with, transactional, direct, and unaffected by the niceties of multilateral diplomacy. Brunson's release in 2018, after Trump threatened crippling sanctions, is still touted by Trump as a personal foreign policy victory. Erdogan, never one to flinch at pressure but always strategic, ultimately relented and pocketed the moment as proof of his own flexibility. Now, Trump sees in Erdogan not just a friend, but a potential peace broker for Ukraine. And let's recall, Erdogan has long straddled the East-West fault line, a NATO member who bought Russian S-400 missiles, a critic of Israel who sells drones to Ukraine, a champion of Palestinian rights who still flirts with EU accession. In the current crisis, Turkey has played both sides, mediating grain deals while refusing to sanction Russia. And now, with Trump reportedly describing the Russian-Ukraine war as a foolish but deadly conflict, it seems he seeks a quick resolution, not one based on justice, but on expedience and on his friends. Trump's instinct is to outsource peacemaking to the only leaders he respects, those who rule with force, hence Erdogan. And their call wasn't limited to Ukraine. Gaza was also discussed, as it should be. Erdogan pressing for a ceasefire, Trump vaguely nodding towards humanitarian concerns. Syria came up too, with Erdogan reiterating his support for territorial integrity, a well-worn phrase that often masks Turkish operations across the northern border, because Turkey has every right and duty to guard its and not its northern border, across the southern border of Turkey, the northern border of Syria, to guard its country. And what's being resurrected here is not diplomacy, it's deal-making. Erdogan offers legitimacy and leverage in war zones. Trump offers potential readmission to American corridors of power. It's a parallel diplomacy reminiscent of Henry Kissinger, but with fewer footnotes and more hashtags. And beneath it all is Erdogan's desire to shape a post-Biden world where Trump might again sit with aplomb behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office, this time unbounded by internal restraint. Well, he's tried that, and after 100 days it looks rather weak and pathetic. But maybe, with international support, he will have much better chance of keeping his seat until the end of his tenure. What does this mean for NATO, for Europe, for the rules-based international order? Trump never cared much for alliances. Erdogan, meanwhile, views alliances as platforms, not necessarily as principles, and their convergence could short-circuit collective diplomacy and turn Ukraine into a private negotiation. There is one thing, and you only have to go to Turkey to realize Erdogan's extraordinary capacity for adaptation and determination. When you travel by car, particularly from Istanbul into the center of Turkey, which I've done, you go through tunnel after tunnel, all of them built by Erdogan. You go from one beautiful road, which is under the control of the AK party, to another, which is under the control of the opposition, which is full of potholes and is quite scary. And that is the reality. Erdogan gets things done. And if Trump can persuade Erdogan to act as intermediary, expect concessions, not Putin's retreat or Ukrainian victory, but more discussions in the nature of the land for peace compromises, the sanctions relief, probably even a divided Ukraine in exchange for peace in our time. This isn't peace, it's partition with PR, but it's likely to move the dialogue forward. And of all the leaders across Europe, Erdogan is the most likely to be able to write a footnote to Trump's transactional efforts. Erdogan is the most likely to be able to take this forward. I also happen to think, for what it's worth, that Erdogan is significantly more principled than Trump. As Trump edges, therefore, towards Erdogan, he's not just stepping into diplomacy, he's resurrecting a world in which personal rapport outweighs parliamentary consent and strong men lean on one another while democracies flounder in process. Erdogan's invitation is more than a photo op, it's a stage for Trump. Trump, always the showman, is ready to perform, but the cost may be borne not by those on stage, but by those still under fire in Kyiv, in Gaza, and beyond. What is certain is the present situation in Ukraine cannot continue, and the present situation in Israel cannot continue, and the threat that the Israeli military will somehow, on a long-term basis, occupy the Gaza Strip and keep Gazans in a very small corner of that strip is simply abominable. And I think the likelihood is that Erdogan's help in sorting out Ukraine will be will be balanced by concessions in Gaza, and I would strongly expect to see a retreat of Israel and a resolution in Gaza. If Erdogan and Trump are working together, I would expect to see a resolution in Gaza almost at the same time as a resolution in Ukraine. And that could only be a positive. I'm certainly not sure that with Erdogan and Trump working together, that Ukraine is going to emerge with its sovereignty fully intact. But I think there's more chance of peace with two people working than with simply one with its harbinger of Vance twittering away as in intermissions, in pauses on its on its gerbil wheel.